Tonight we go to a place where horse farms like this are playgrounds for people with big names and big money. Blue bloods from Kentucky, thoroughbreds in their own right, but with some ugly family secrets. Our story begins with a life of promise, leads to romance, but ends with revenge and murder. On a warm summer morning in south central Kentucky, a pastoral cemetery becomes the setting for the final act of a tragedy, one that would echo clear across the bluegrass state and beyond.
It was just unbelievable. It's the most bizarre story probably in modern Kentucky history.
Typically, we don't deal with influential people involved in homicide.
A lone figure approaches the grave of beloved former Governor Louis B. Nunn. It's the late governor's 56-year-old son, Steve, here to face the legacy he failed to live up to.
He was sore, he was mad, he was embarrassed, he was unemployed, and he was broke, and he was drunk.
I was concerned about Steve maybe hurting himself.
In his mind, Steve Nunn is a victim, driven first to ruin, then madness by his former fiancee, Amanda Ross.
He had it all, and when he lost it all, he was angry.
He has driven from the scene of his revenge to his parents' final resting place. He used the word revenge.
Yes, revenge.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
He slits his wrists as he weeps in shame, dripping blood on the stone marking his mother's grave. At the same time, police are trying to find him, talking to his ex-wife, Tracy Damron.
We can see the writing on the wall. It's just madness.
And I said, I know in my heart he would be at his dad and mom's cemetery.
The cemetery?
The cemetery.
It's like right out of a murder novel.
Something like that.
Minutes later, law enforcement is on the scene.
About that time, they noticed Mr. Nunn kind of hiding. He had a gun in his hand.
He stands up, turns away, and raises his weapon.
It was shots that I heard, but I wasn't for sure what I was hearing.
I think Steve wanted to die. I know he did.
The Kentucky Steve Nunn knew was a world of thoroughbred horse racing, of pretty women in fancy hats, and of fine barrel-aged bourbon. Nunn had a taste for all three.
I love you all. I love the people of Kentucky.
He'd grown up in an elite insular realm of country clubs, charity events, debutante balls, a realm that Lexington radio host and society maven Sue Wiley has been observing and enjoying for decades.
The scale of entertaining was lavish is the only word. Dinner jackets and formal gowns and jewels.
Thank you, my friends.
Privilege and power seemed to be his birthright ever since his father Louis was elected governor back in 1967. As a teenager, Steve is a kind of prince, #1 son for an entire state. Lexington has its fair share of stately homes, but the governor's mansion just up the road in Frankfort dwarfs them all. What does it mean to be a nun in Kentucky?
To be a nun in Kentucky, there was power behind that name.
And we've got a message for him in Kentucky this year, and we've got one for him in Washington next year.
But it's a double-edged sword. Governor Louis Nunn, standing 6'4" and one of the most talented politicians of his era, is a larger-than-life figure in every sense of the term. Being his son is no walk in the bluegrass.
Steve wanted his father's respect, wanted his father's good opinion, wanted his father's love.
In Steve, I see someone who wanted to please his father, who wanted to follow in his father's footsteps.
Al Cross covered politics for the Louisville Courier-Journal, watching as the affable and handsome youth embraces celebrity in the shadow of his father's fame.
When you're the only son of such a powerful, successful, overwhelming kind of politician, much can be expected of you. And I think that Louis expected more from Steve than he should have.
If you were going to design your father, you would not design Louis Nunn.
Larry Forgy was Governor Nunn's budget director. While he admired his boss's political skills, he abhorred how Louis treated his adoring son.
Louis Nunn was a man of ridicule. And I think Steve Nunn, unfortunately, grew up in ridicule.
After his father leaves office, the family would eventually relocate to this rural estate. Now it is Steve's time. He attends law school and has a stint in business before, inevitably, entering politics, winning a seat as a Republican state representative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. This is really a public health issue for...
Steve was almost a mirror image of his father physically. He was politically ambitious.
It's also a public...
That was the logical thing to do.
But if Steve has the desire to be his dad, it's not clear he has the requisite skill or the toughness.
He was not Louis Nunn. He was a quieter, gentler man.
Well, people would say things like, you know, he'll never be his father.
And all the while, the specter of Louis's expectations hangs over him.
And it grew as time grew. And Louis is there watching all the time.
Predictably, the legendary Governor Louis Nunn is neither amused nor impressed by the mini-me accomplishments of his son.
In their interaction, both public and private, you could tell that Steve never quite measured up in Louis's eyes, and he knew it.
There's love, and then there's conditional love. And there was a lot of conditional love in this family.
Family politics can be the ugliest politics of all.
It can.
Steve is becoming more like his father, but liking him less and less. Behind the gates of the Nunn family estate, some ugly secrets threaten to destroy an already tense relationship. In 1994, Steve's mother Beulah divorces Louis and seeks a restraining order against him. Things allegedly come to a boil in an altercation, with Steve intervening to protect her.
Steve thought she was going to be physically abused by his father during a family argument, and apparently he attacked the governor, and it did rupture their relationship.
It ended here, in a handwritten letter with the now elderly former governor saying he would not tolerate any further physical abuse. For years, the father and son wouldn't speak. The Nunns are a political dynasty disintegrating as the seeds of tragedy take root. What happens next will shock everyone.
People were stunned. It's a stunt.